decade, Microsoft's preeminence in analytics and business intelligence are because of Microsoft Power BI. Power BI Desktop is a free Windows application that allows you to connect to hundreds of data sources, transform, shape, and relate your data to build a data model, create visually rich interactive reports based on your model, then share the model and your reports with others in your team or organization. Please join me as we explore using Power BI Desktop to build data models that make a positive impact for you, your team, and your organization. Here's what you'll need to work along with me in this course. First, some hardware recommendations. Microsoft requires 2 gigabytes of available RAM and 4 or more is recommended. If you're working with larger data models, then you will brush up against these limitations fairly quickly. Even though 4 gigabytes of available RAM is recommended, if you have 8 or more gigabytes available, you will be much happier. You'll need a CPU of 1 gigahertz or faster, and Microsoft's recommendation now is a 64-bit processor. The display requirement is 1440 by 900 or 1600 by 900 if you're using a 16 by 9 display. This is important because Power BI Desktop uses all this real estate. So if your resolution is set lower, for example, 1024 by 768, Power BI Desktop will actually display some items off the edge of the screen where you can't see them. And there's nothing more frustrating than a dialog box that you can't close because you can't even see it. If you've modified your display settings to increase the size of your text, for example, to 125 or 150%, that will cause the same type of problem. So if you need to change your display settings, you'll find them under Settings, System, Display, in whatever version of Windows you're using. In terms of software, Power BI requires Windows 8.1 or higher. Windows 7 is no longer supported. And you will also need to have .NET 4.6.2. It's probably already installed on your computer, but if you get a message that it's not, simply install it. It's free. Technically, you can use Internet Explorer 11 or a later version of IE right now. However, Power BI will no longer support Internet Explorer 11 as of August 17th of 2021. So this is a great time for you to move up to a newer browser like Microsoft Edge Chromium, which I will be using in the course. Finally, you need Power BI Desktop, which is a free download from Microsoft. And I'll show you how to install and launch that later in the course if you have not installed it already. You also need to bring some skills and experience to this course. I assume, for example, that if we are using Excel, which we will do at the beginning of the course, you would already know how to enter, edit, and format numbers and text, use the Format as Table command and the other tools that are available within a table, find and replace text and numbers, sort and filter data, and insert and format visualizations, or as they're called in Excel, charts. If these are comfortable skills for you in Excel, that's great because these are exactly the skills you want to bring to Power BI Desktop. But if any of this looks unfamiliar and you'd like to brush up on your data skills now or at any time during the course, I highly recommend Managing and Analyzing Data in Excel. This course is for Excel 2019 or Excel for Office 365, but there are also versions of this course for Excel 2016 and 2013, and Power BI works with all of these versions of Excel. You'll find all 3 of these courses in the LinkedIn Learning Library. With our hardware, software, and skill settings in place, let's continue. Microsoft Power BI Desktop is one tool in a suite of tools. The Power BI suite also includes Power BI for mobile, a report server, developer tools, gateways, but the heart of Power BI is the Power BI service, also called Power BI on the web, PowerBI.com, or simply Power BI. We'll use this service when we're ready to publish reports from Power BI Desktop in order to share them with our colleagues. We can also take any reports that we have published and return them to Power BI Desktop for revision or expansion. Power BI Services, hosted by Microsoft, has its own extended feature set. You can create direct interactive connections to your data, as well as having your data served by the Power BI service. You can explore data with natural language, which we can also do in the reports we create in Power BI Desktop. The Power BI service is the only place that we can create dashboards, and those dashboards can be viewed in a browser but also on mobile devices. And with Power BI services, you can use specialized templates for software as a service, for example, Microsoft Dynamics 365. There are different licensing levels or versions of Power BI, and they're based on price. There is a free but limited standard license. Power BI Pro, a higher level of licensing, is currently $9.99 per month per user. However, there is a free trial available so that you can take it for a spin. Power BI Premium is designed for large-scale BI deployments. It is an enterprise tool. But to create enterprise data models, regardless of whether your organization is licensed for Power BI Premium or not, you really want Power BI Pro. There are some distinct differences between the licensing for Power BI Pro and the free licensing. With free Power BI, you have a 1 gigabyte data limit. Your data gets refreshed daily. You have 10,000 rows an hour that you can stream, and your data is delivered through the Power BI service. With Power BI Pro, that data limit is bumped up to 10 gigabytes. Your data is refreshed hourly. You have 1 million rows an hour of streaming data, and you can establish a direct interactive connection to your data. Some of these are big differences that impact our ability to model quickly in Power BI Desktop. I will be taking advantage of a Power BI Pro level of licensing in this course, and I recommend that you do so as well. And I'll tell you more about this in the movie Install Power BI Desktop. Regardless of which Power BI license you are using, Power BI Desktop itself is a free download only available for Microsoft Windows. Using Power BI Desktop, we will get data by connecting to data services, create data models by transforming data columns and relating our tables or data sources. We create visualizations and reports that illustrate the data in our model. And if we wish, we can share our reports and data models with our team or other colleagues. This list of Power BI Desktop capabilities is also the outline for this course. We will begin by retrieving different types of data files, databases, web sources, files, SharePoint lists. We will then create several different data models while we explore the Power Query Editor's data shaping and transformation tools. These first two capabilities, get data and model data, are the reason Power BI Desktop exists, so this is where we will spend most of our time. But we will use the last and largest model we create, countries and population data, to create visualizations and build a simple report. Finally, we will explore ways to share our report and our data models using the Power BI service and Microsoft Teams. Let's continue. In this movie, I'm going to show you how to install Power BI Desktop. And if you don't already have a Power BI account, I'll show you how to do that as well. So if you already have a Power BI account for Power BI Pro or Premium and it's installed, you can simply meet us in the next movie. If you've been using Power BI Service, it's very easy to download Power BI Desktop from here. Simply click the More button next to your avatar in the upper right-hand corner, point to download and choose Power BI Desktop. And you'll be taken wherever you need to get Power BI Desktop from. I'm running Windows 10, so it wants to take me to the Microsoft Store, and this is where you would choose to get Power BI Desktop, which I already have. If you don't have Power BI on the computer you're working with now, you've not worked with the service, that's okay. In that event, we're going to go to powerbi.microsoft.com. And at the top, you'll see Try Free. And you'll find Try Free and Start Free in many places. And when you click the link, you can try Power BI for free right here. And it will check, and if you already have Power BI, it'll tell you it looks like you're already a Microsoft customer. Sign in to get Power BI along with your account. Very simple process. But what if you don't already have a Microsoft 365 or Office 365 account connected to your current email address? Well, let's talk a little bit about the email addresses that are used by Power BI. Power BI is designed to support only organizational email addresses. So if you have an email that ends in .com or .edu or another valid organizational ID, for example, .info, .net, you can use those to sign up for Power BI. If you have a .gov or .mil address, if you work for the government, then consult with your Power BI administrator because the process is a little bit different. What you can't use are consumer email addresses like Hotmail, Gmail, Outlook.com. If that's the only type of email address you can use to sign up for Power BI, there is a workaround. You can sign up for an Office 365 E3 trial. That's Enterprise Level 3 trial. And when you do that, you'll actually get a new Office 365 tenant that has accounts for 25 people in it, and it will include Outlook and an email address. Your email address will be something like your name at a company name you provide.microsoft.com. And then what you do is you use that email account from the trial to sign up for Power BI. The downside is that you're the administrator for a tenant. So you'll get emails about your new account. When you're done with it in a couple of months, you will need to decide if you want to make it permanent by paying for it. However, during this course and for quite a while afterwards, this will give you what you need, which is an email address that you can use to sign up for Power BI. And that's the address that you would enter if you chose Try Power BI for free. There's one more possibility, which is that you receive an email with a link to a Power BI report. And when you click on the report, then you're asked to enter your organizational email address. And as long as you are licensed for Power BI in your organization, then you can directly load Power BI while you're launching that report. If my organization is already licensed for Power BI and I'm simply downloading Power BI Desktop will download and install and I can immediately use it. If, on the other hand, I'm creating a new Power BI installation for my organization, whether that's with a trial or because I'm the first Power BI user in my organization, then the new tenant for Power BI has to be created, and you may have to wait a little bit of time for that to happen before you can run Power BI. When you install Power BI Desktop, one of the options is to put a link directly on your Windows desktop. If you didn't do that, then if you go to your Start menu and scroll down to the P's, you will find Power BI Desktop. And I also then chose to add it to my Smart menu. If you go to Microsoft Power BI, this is actually not taking you to desktop. It's Power BI Desktop that you wish to select. Power BI Desktop loads. I know I'm signed in because here I am in the upper right-hand corner. And when it loads, on the left-hand side, I have access to Get Data and recent PBIX or Power BI files that I have worked with, as well as other reports. You can turn this screen off so you won't see it at startup, but I actually like to see it because it provides current information to me. For example, what's new and improved in this month's Power BI update. I can visit the Power BI forum, or I can view the Power BI blog. And I highly recommend this blog because it gives you a breakdown, not just a list of what's new with Power BI every month, and some information about the new features. Power BI is updated very frequently, sometimes more than once a week. So there will always be a gap between, for example, this course that's recorded at a specific point in time and the new features that have been added or features that have been modified since the course was recorded. By keeping up with the Power BI blog, you'll know exactly when new features are available to you. If you don't want to see this again, simply turn off this checkbox. I'm going to close this introductory screen and show you a little bit about how we navigate in Power BI Desktop. First, at the top, we have a ribbon. This is the Home tab of our ribbon. The ribbon also has an Insert tab, a Modeling tab, a View tab, and a Help tab. This is a relatively new interface. There have been a lot of changes here in the last 2 months. On the left-hand side, we have 3 different view buttons. The first is Report, which allows us to create and view a report. And in this report view, notice at the bottom we have, for example, page tabs because our reports can have multiple pages. We also have a dotted line that shows us the edges of this report page. Next, we have data, and we don't have any data yet, but when we do, it will appear here. And then finally, our third view is a model view. It has relationships so that we can relate one table or one set of data to another table or set of data. Finally, on the right-hand side, we have panes that appear that are appropriate to whatever view it is we are working with, or perhaps to a specific report. In Report View, we have a Visualizations pane, but we also have a Filters pane that can be expanded and collapsed, and a Fields list that can be expanded and collapsed. When we're looking at our data, all we have is fields. And in the Relationships view, we have a Properties pane and a Fields list here as well. The Fields list appears in each one of the views in Microsoft Power BI Desktop. Those are the basics of the user interface for Power BI Desktop. If you've been working already with the Power BI service, then you may be used to having access to a limited number of types of data connections. That's totally different here in Power BI Desktop. Here, when you click Get Data, initially a list opens of common types of data sources. However, if you click More at the bottom, what you will see is a long list of types of data that we can retrieve, different connections that we can create. There are 6 basic types. The first is File, and we have access in Power BI Service to Excel and to CSV, but here in Power BI Desktop, we also have access to XML files, to PDF files, to SharePoint folders. We have databases, including SQL Server and Access, and all these other databases. Some of these are in beta, so it is a data connection type that is new, and you can check it out if you are using, for example, Jethro database, and see if it works for you. IBM Informix. After it's been used for a while, it won't be in beta anymore. Next, we have Power Platform. Power BI is part of the Microsoft Power Platform. So here we have data sets and data flows that were created using Power BI. But we also have the Dataverse, which is the updated version of the Common Data Service and is still available, but it's the legacy service. But here we have the Dataverse, which is used by all the tools in the Power Platform and other applications like Microsoft Teams. And also Power Platform data flows still in beta. Azure is our cloud services. Azure SQL Database, all the way through Azure Time Series Insights. Online services includes Microsoft SharePoint Online, Microsoft Exchange, and Dynamics, but it also includes other SaaS or software as a service connections. For example, we have the ability to connect to LinkedIn Sales Navigator, to Marketo, to Smartsheet, to Intune Data Warehouse, Web Trends Analytics, many different choices. You can always search here in the box for a particular type of data you want to retrieve, and it doesn't just search whatever category you have connected, it searches everywhere. But what if the connection you want isn't here? What if it doesn't exist? Well then, choose Other. Under Other, we have Web, SharePoint List, Microsoft Exchange, Active Directory, but we also have the ability to retrieve data using an OData feed, ODBC, or OLADB, which means we can connect to almost any data source, even if there isn't a pre-built connection for it. Whenever we choose a data source and click Connect, whatever happens next is based on the data source type we chose to connect to. In the next few movies, I'll show you how to connect to some common data sources using Power BI Desktop. Before we can create a data model in Power BI Desktop, we need to get some data that we can model with. We will begin by getting some data from Microsoft Excel. The exercise files in the Chapter 2 folder include an Excel workbook called Median Age. The data in this workbook comes to us from Gapminder, a fabulous site that was created by Hans Rowling and his colleagues. The Gapminder site includes basic facts about countries in the world. And you might know of Hans from different TED Talks that he has done. All the data from Gapminder is available for free. So I could click Excel here, or I can choose Get Data Excel. It's exactly the same. So we'll just click the button. And I'm going to go to my Documents folder to the exercise files because that's where I put them, Chapter 2 and medianage.xlsx, and click Open. This particular set of data is median ages for different countries and in different decades, also projected forward into the future. When you download data from Gapminder, the workbook also includes documentation. So there's an About page that includes information about where this data actually came from, the United Nations Population Division, and so on. The data that I want is data about countries. These are spreadsheets. These are tables. And it's simply two ways to view this workbook. If I want to look at a particular spreadsheet, it's here. If I want to look at a table, I would choose it here. So if I were to choose countries, I would get this table. And you'll notice no matter what you select here, the Load and Transform Data buttons aren't enabled yet, and that's because I haven't really selected anything. There are little checkboxes in front of the items. And as I move from one table to the next or one spreadsheet to the next, I get a preview here on the right. I'm going to choose the suggested table for countries, and notice that when I check the box, I have the ability to load and to transform data. Why might I want to transform this data before I load it? In this example, in this data set, the top row, median age 1950, 1955, and so on, contains years, and most data tools, including Power BI, when it sees numbers across a column, assumes that it's a row of data, not a row of headings. So I could transform this data here if I wished, or I could fix it after I load the data, which is in fact what I'm going to do. Note at the bottom, the data in this preview has been truncated due to size limits. All of these previews are just to give us a taste, a sample. I'm going to click Load. Here comes my data being loaded into my model. And you might say, well, great, but where's my data? I don't see it here. Well, this is the report view. We haven't begun to build our report, but if I click on the data view, here is my data. If I go back to the report view, I also know that the data is imported because it's listed here in the fields list. And if I expand it, I will see all of these different columns. And note, they're just column 10, column 11. I already showed you we had a problem and that we need to transform this data, which will not take us long at all. If I wish, I can save this for further work later, and in fact, that is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to choose File, Save As, and it takes me back to the same folder I was in, which is Exercise Files Chapter 2, and it's showing me the list of Power BI files, PBIX files, not Excel spreadsheets, because when I save from Power BI, I'm saving as a PBIX. So I'm going to call it Median Age. It will have a .pbix extension, and I'm going to click Save. For a brief period of time, there was actually a way to be able to close or exit Power BI in an elegant way in order to close down a data model. In fact, we had an exit button, but we don't have an exit button now, and it's not listed on the file menu. So if you want to close a data set, you in fact are going to close Power BI. And I can do that right here. Whenever you want to create a new data model, you close Power BI Desktop and open it up again. For a short period of time, there was actually an exit button, but there isn't now. You simply exit in the upper right-hand corner and start Power BI again if you intend to start a new model. In other words, work with a different set of data. Otherwise, if I continue with the model and choose Get Data, I'm adding additional data to the model I already have. The next type of data source we're going to connect to is also a file data source, and it's a CSV file, or comma-separated values file. The reason we want to know how to connect to this particular type of data source is that if you work in an organization where your IT department exports data to you for your use, the two most common formats that it will be exported in are Excel and as a text or CSV file. So I chose Get Data, choose Text CSV, and click Connect. And again, we're looking for a file data source here with a CSV. It's in the Chapter 2 exercise files, and it is called gdp.csv. Now, CSV files are flat files. They don't have multiple sheets and multiple tables like you would see in Excel, so we immediately get a preview that shows us the data that we have. Choices that we can make here are the type of file origin we have. This was actually read by Power BI, that it's a Windows file. The delimiter normally will be a comma in a CSV. That's what the C stands for. But you might have a file that is delimited in another manner. For example, you might have a file where the individual data elements are separated by tabs. That second most common type of delimited file. And we also have other choices. If you have a file that someone used a custom symbol, for example, the pipe symbol on the keyboard to separate columns, you can do that here. And then finally, the last type of delimited file is actually not delimited at all. It is a type of file called fixed width. You would see these most frequently in older legacy systems, healthcare, insurance agencies, and in fixed width files. We don't have any symbol delimiting the columns. We actually have allocated specific space. For example, the first 10 characters as an account number, the next 10 characters as a last name. So you simply choose the type of delimiter you have, and we can instruct Power BI, take a look at the types of data that we think we have here in these columns based on the first 200 rows, a sample, or based on the entire data set. Or don't detect data types, which means you will have to assign all of the data types. Not a big deal. But if the rows in your data source tend to be representative, then you can simply go with this first 200 rows, and Power BI will detect the data type for country, for region, for year, and for GDP per person. There's only one data set here, so I don't need to choose what I'm going to load. And again, I could transform data first if I wish to, but I'm not going to. I'll show you transformation later after we've learned how to connect to different data types. So I'm simply going to load this, wait for it to load. And then if we wish to see the fields that have been loaded, here they are. If I want to look at my data sample, I can click the Data View button, and here is my data. If you wish to save this file, you can, and perhaps do something with it later on in the course. I'm simply going to close Power BI Desktop, and when I'm prompted, say, no, I don't want to save my changes. Most enterprise-level data is not kept in Microsoft Excel or in CSV files, even though if it's exported to you, that might be what you receive. Enterprise data is kept in a database. When we choose Get Data and More, and then choose the database category, we get a list of the databases that we can import data from. And the only one of these that might be a local data source would probably be an Access database. Regardless of the type of database you choose, the process will be similar. You're going to select the type of database first and click Connect. And then a dialog box will appear that will tell you what information you need to provide to be able to connect to this database. So if you're connecting to a SQL Server database, you need to know the server and you need to know the database. And then there are some advanced options that I'm going to open so I can talk with you about them for a moment. If you don't already have a connection into the SQL Server database and tables that you want to retrieve, this is a great time to have a conversation with your database administrator. Take them out for a cup of coffee or a healthy snack and tell them what you're trying to accomplish in Power BI and ask them for the settings here. And the reason that this is important is you have the opportunity to send a SQL statement to the database that will filter the database so you don't have to do it in Power BI. As an example, you may want to retrieve some customer information, and perhaps you have 500,000 customers, but you only want the customers who have purchased something in the last year. Perhaps that's half of those customers. You can filter that data before it ever goes to Power BI